Hello and welcome back to How Did You Do It? On this episode, it is a bit of a bonus episode for you where I have invited my grandpa onto the podcast and we discuss life in his eyes at 89 years old. We discuss the death of my grandma, who, as we talk about in the episode, it's very hard to explain the impact that she had on all of our lives and life after losing the love of your life. We talk about philosophies on what's important in life and looking back over the past 89 years for him, what has stood out, what he's learnt and how he really approaches life. It's an episode that I've been wanting to record for a while. And one of my biggest regrets is that I didn't record a conversation with my granny, who is now no longer here. So she lives on in our memory and through our hearts. But with the opportunity to interview my grandpa, I feel so honoured to be able to give his wisdom to you. And I think that we can always give people the chance to speak what we can learn from them. I think that so often we discard or discredit people without knowing what they've gone through. And my aim within this podcast is to really give light to the everyday journey, the everyday story, and to give people a platform to talk about what's important to them, what's shaped them, and then we can learn from that. I do hope that you enjoy this episode, and I cannot wait for you to hear it. And as always, I can't wait to hear your feedback. Hi, Papa. Or I guess you're Felix to the world. To me, you're Papa. Thank you for coming on. I am so excited to talk to you and record this. I think that we have had many conversations over my 28 years of being alive. But more recently, in the past few years, we've had a few conversations when I've gone through some hard things and you've shared with me a lot of wisdom, and I want to record it and share it with the world.
Good.
I wanted to start with, actually, this is a terrible thing that I need to ask this, but how old are you now?
Now I'm 89.
Okay. With 89 years of life and experiences, I remind myself quite often that whatever I'm struggling with right now is just a small chapter of my life. And I look through my life of primary school, which, you know, the memories are faded, to high school, which the memories are more clear, to the past 5 years of my life, which are very clear in my memory. And I wanted it from your perspective of, you know, the chapters of your life and what you've been through, which I'm sure you will elaborate on, and how that impacts the way that you see life today.
So for me, it's not really the matter of how many years. It's been some seminal experiences. Being born in Japan, just before the war, moving to Shanghai in China. Because we had British passports, we were put into prison camp for 3 years. Then my parents suddenly deciding to send me off to boarding school in the States when I was 13. Not being able to continue to stay in the States because I had to keep on studying and I wasn't in the mood to study anymore after my bachelor's degree. So I went back to Japan and Hong Kong in business, getting married there. So I'm trying to say that these seminal experiences are what really formed my life rather than the amount of time I've been on this earth. And then after my first marriage, eventually getting divorced after having 2 children, living in Australia, and then meeting my partner of 40 years, your grandmother. So I guess I'm saying that certain particular experiences have formed what my life has been about. If these things hadn't happened, doesn't matter that I'm 89 or 96 or whatever. It's not a question of time. It just things happen. That's my experience.
Are there, we can take it in 2 ways. We can jump straight into Granny Zita, or we can go into your experience in camp.
Look, maybe let's go back a bit. I was 7 when the war broke out. I think you'll know about Pearl Harbor. Shanghai was overrun by Japanese troops at that point, and they informed everybody who had been an ally, that is British, French, Dutch, American, that we were going to be put into prison camp. So for the next year and a half, we had to walk around with armbands. B3436 was my number. It wasn't tattooed. It was a red fabric around my arm. We were sent up what's called the Grand Canal waterway from Shanghai to Yangzhou. It's a small walled city, very old city, and were kept there for about 6 months. Then because I was still young, the authorities decided that there was no milk available for children, but there was soybean milk, which you would know as soy milk now, in a place much closer to Shanghai. So we went back there for the next 2 years. Life in camp was quite frightening. There were troops everywhere with their fixed bayonets, barking, literally barking at us. We had daily roll calls where we had to answer to our names. And I mean, keep in mind, I'm 8, 9 years old at this point. It's a bit scary, particularly because I had a kind of a love-hate relationship with Japanese since I was born in Japan and knew some lovely people who were staff who worked at the house, cook, nanny, that sort of thing. But these were very different Japanese, and they wanted to show they were in control, and they did show it. And we had electrified barbed wire around the camp, which if you touched, you'd die. One kid by mistake touched it. I stayed clear from it, thank God. Then after camp, I don't know how much you know of the history, but Mao Zedong with the communist movement was moving to take over all of China from the nationalist government. And in 1948, they would have been maybe half a year away from Shanghai. My parents took a decision to send me to boarding school in the States. So I went there on a ship at the age of 13, which, thinking back, is a bit weird because, yes, I had been through some very difficult experiences, but I was still 13 years old. I'm going halfway across the world on my own. Granny, your grandmother, my wife, used to say, "Oh, didn't you feel abandoned?" I said, having gone through prison camp and the war, nothing seemed to be very difficult. So going to the States, wow, so exciting. I remember first arriving in New York and looking at the buildings and just mouth wide open. It was something that I had not experienced before. And then afterwards going back to the Far East to go into business, because I hadn't really intended to go into business. My interest lay elsewhere, but there seemed to be no choice. And in a way, business turned out to be very fortunate because I learned so much in business. So much. And by the way, on that point about camp and the being imprisoned, that's the connection I have with COVID. When COVID happened, I thought to myself, goodness me, this is almost like being in camp. I have to stay here, but there's no barbed wire. I've got plenty of food. Granny was the most wonderful cook, so I had no worries about that, whereas my mother in camp had to cook the vegetable allotment we had. And so it reminded me of COVID, but I realized how much more fortunate I was.
And also I remember you saying we're being kept in to be safe with all of this comfort around us to protect us from something that is deadly versus being kept somewhere where death was, like it was always a potential that could happen within the camp.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if the Japanese guards decided that you were a collaborator, meaning you were trying to do some spy work or something like that, they would give you a very rough time. My mother was called into the committee and said, "Why do you talk to that Japanese guard every evening?" in Japanese on top of it. She said, he's homesick. He's 16 years old. He misses his family. He likes to talk to me. I guess I'm a mother figure to him. So things like that happened.
Mm, mm. What was your perspective on society within COVID when, I remember we've had a conversation that we spoke about, how COVID sort of made us realize the very simple things that we were able to do, which was walk around the park and what that gave us and the simple joys versus this fast-paced world that we live in now, which is so embedded within, technology. And I mean, you've been on this planet for 89 years and you've seen so many things come in through technology. How do you see that shift?
So I take it in a slightly different way. For me, COVID, I think the overriding feeling was a sense that we are all in the same boat. And when I have that feeling, I have a sense of connection with other people that I don't normally have under other circumstances. We all had to do what we had to do. We couldn't do certain things either, but it was the same for all of us unless we broke the rules, which was not my intention. So there was a feeling of connection. I've done a lot of work with Jung and his ideas, Carl Jung. And one of his ideas is about the collective unconscious. And I've basically been a loner all my life, really keeping to myself in school, after school, university. Many friends had commented, how come you're often alone? I sense that aloneness, but when I came across Jung's ideas of the collective unconscious, I realized that maybe whether I like it or not, I'm connected to everybody and they are connected to me. My ancestors, my family, even people I don't know. So there was that sense in COVID of a connection to people that I normally wouldn't have felt. And it was comforting.
Mm. I mean, that's a really beautiful way of looking at it.
I think the way you look at things is absolutely essential because it's all about attitude. I mean, you can really get yourself down in the dumps, or you can say, the future is uncertain. To me, that's a very optimistic point of view. It means I don't know what it's going to be. The pessimist would say, it's going to be bad. I don't feel that way at all. I say, I don't know. To me, those three words, I don't know, are probably the most crucial words in the English language. I really don't know. That's 4 words.
I think a lot of people would find that quite anxiety-inducing because we can't really sit with uncertainty as a society, I think. I think we like to be certain and we create habits.
For me, there's no such thing as certainty, and the anxiety for me comes from telling myself things are not going to work out. So I say, I don't know. They may or they may not work out. And the other thing is that they may not work out in the way I thought, but they'll work out in another perfectly satisfactory way. I mean, overall, I'm exaggerating. But generally, things tend to work out because the more you look at the situation, the more you see the possibilities. Having a connection with a person or being involved, whether physically or emotionally, doesn't necessarily mean that changes my status of being the loner. For me, my way of being, my existential position in this world is, as I believe it is for all of us, but many don't want to recognize it, is being alone, as in being on my own. I don't mean I necessarily feel lonely, but I really do feel that aloneness. And it may be because I've spent a lot of time on my own, and maybe I've got to learn to like it.
So that would be you prefer to be alone but within connection of others?
Well, like I said earlier, the connection with others sort of gradually, that notion gradually appeared as I got older. I don't think I realized how my modus operandi was being alone. Yes, I had friends. Yes, I knew people. But it was more what I actually selected how to be in this world. I think I tend to be alone. I read a lot. I've read much more. I remember going, Harvard had asked me to come and study at their university. And one of the questions the interviewer asked was, what are you reading? Not so much what my school curriculum was, it's what else are you reading? And I was reading a hell of a lot else. And so on the strength of that, they sort of figured, well, I'd be good material to go there. In the end, I didn't. I went to a small Quaker college near Philadelphia. And I've often wondered about the difference between those two kinds of education. I suppose my nature, maybe I was better off where a small place, Harvard's a huge place, Harvard and Yale both. So
amazing though. Amazing that you had that opportunity.
yeah, times were different then. There were all kinds of quotas. There were quotas on blacks, quotas on Jews at that time. I'm talking about the 1950s. I started college in 51. And keep in mind, it was a very big adjustment in spite of the fact that I was all excited to get to New York and to the States. To adjust to American way of life and their values was not so easy. I had no experience of that sort of thing. I had no experience of girlfriends or dating. I'm talking now, I was 13 when I arrived. But I was...
You quickly learned?
No, I didn't. And in fact, in some ways, I didn't want to learn because I really didn't appreciate, I'm generalizing, the American way of being. I believe I'm the only person who obtained a green card to reside in the States and actually returned it. I thought to myself, I have plenty of relatives over there, but I actually don't want to live there. And this is after some maturity and time had passed since I was a student there, because in the beginning I thought, oh, yes, this would be a place to stay, and I couldn't. And often you may have experienced this. You desperately want something that you can't have, and you finally get it, and you think, what do I want this for? I don't want this. And that's why I came to Australia to live and, not the States.
How did that change your perspective on wanting and desire?
I think I realized that in many ways I didn't know what I wanted or desired, and it needed time and experience and maturity and an understanding mainly of myself to know what I wanted. It wasn't so easy. My first marriage, my head was turned by a woman a ballet dancer, a fashion model, a British Airways stewardess, all these things at the same time. It turned my head. And she was very outgoing. She'd speak to anybody, anywhere. And I thought, how that wonderful is this. And then as the time went by, I realized I don't particularly want to do this. I can do it, but I don't want to. So it was more a question of understanding myself.
So you realized within that marriage, understanding yourself, that wasn't for you?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then it becomes a big question mark. What is for me? Who is for me? And as things happen in life, because my birth daughter and my wife's daughter, who was also my daughter, were in school together at the age of 8, and they were at a birthday party at my house, and I got to know the family, and that's how I got to know Granny. Who on earth would have thought that I would have had an opportunity like that? I mean, there was no way in my normal, if I can even call it surroundings, that I would meet somebody like Granny, but then I did. So these are the crucial things that I say that are the key rather than the amount of time I've spent on this earth.
Do you believe everything happens for a reason?
I think we can figure out the reasons as we go along, and in a way it's a kind of rationalization. I don't cater to the idea of some overpowering force that is guiding us. I really don't. And I think we all have to take responsibility for our decision because we're the ones that are forging the way. It's not, the road is created as we walk, metaphorically speaking. It's not there already. Sometimes you have to discover there is no road, and you have to find your way through the metaphorical forest or valley or whatever it is
Mm.
to find your way.
I find it, I wouldn't have expected that answer from you, that you don't believe that there's some type of something.
Or I believe there's a huge power. The power in the atom, for example, is beyond belief. And for me, the fact of the 2 atomic bombs at Hiroshima and Nagasaki were absolutely crucial to my life, because they are what stopped the war, and that's how we got out of prison camp. So in nature, in things we don't even know about, there's tremendous power and vitality. And when you look at plants and animals, it's just so wondrous. But I don't have the notion, as maybe I was encouraged to as a younger person, to think that there's a God, whether she or he, sitting there judging and directing. No, I don't believe that anymore.
No.
And frankly, I've given up on organized religion entirely. I don't attend. I have to live with my own conscience.
Yeah. No, I definitely align with that. I think that I also don't believe in the God sitting, judging, making the decisions, but knowing that within nature there's things that we don't understand, how they come to be, the power of how it works. I align with that for sure. I want to talk about Granny, and I will definitely cry. It's already there. 40 years with her.
I knew her for 75. We first met 22, so that's 24, 47 years. I knew her, but we didn't get married till about 8 years into the... At first, we weren't even thinking of getting married. We both had been divorced. But she was someone I can't even start to describe how unique. Well, you would know. But she was, in my experience, she had such a pure and kind and gentle and understanding nature, and she had such a sense of humor. She would make me laugh all the time, and I think that's one of the most important things about our connection, was we were laughing all the time. It didn't matter. We weren't telling jokes. We were just finding things very, very funny, in a look or a moment of some extraordinary experience. She didn't seem to hold grudges. I had an older sister who was constantly holding grudges and switched off me for 5 years for something I had not even done, some family lack of inclusion of her daughter in a family affair party. But Granny Zita, she didn't seem to hold grudges. She understood human nature. She was an extraordinary counselor with Lifeline. As a volunteer, they made her a supervisor. I remember in the middle of the night, she was on the suicide call end of it, and I would hear, oh yes, and how long since she took the pills, and when are the police coming, and yet she handled it all as a volunteer without specific training. So she had an extremely unique nature. She lived, as you know, in South Africa, and when I first went with her to South Africa, it was still the time of apartheid, and I said, Zita, I'm never going to come back here until apartheid is over. I cannot I don't want to face this horrible treatment of human beings. I've already had some inkling of that in Shanghai by the Japanese, but this was different. This was racial. So eventually I didn't go back until afterwards. But her background in South Africa, I think, also helped to formulate her deepest ideas about what's important in life and relationship between people. She always used to look out for her African staff. Police would sometimes come and say, oh, your maid has her husband here. She said, where's your search warrant? I won't let you in. And then, meanwhile, the husband, who had been visiting, escaped from the back door. She was always, and we took out the woman who used to be the nanny to her children. We took her to a really slap-up lunch at the President Hotel when we visited, and she was so happy about it.
I struggle to deal with such a loss of someone like Granny, and then to try and explain who she is to people who don't know her. And it's like, you can't, I've had all these realizations of the impact you can have on people. And
I think I feel the same way. There's no way really that I can explain to other people who and what she was. Only I know, you know, people who knew her know, but otherwise it's very, very difficult because you don't find a person with that combination of qualities that easily in this world. I understand everybody thinks their partner's special, but I'm talking from a fairly wide range of experience. No, I'm not talking about what you're thinking. I'm talking about my experience of people made me realize how distinctive and unique she was, which I think is what you're referring to.
Yeah, because she was here and then she wasn't. And even,
Can I add, she's still here. That's how powerful my feeling about her is. She's literally, whether she's physically around, and I really don't think the body is what it signifies a life. It's a presence. She's there all the time as far as I'm concerned.
How do you experience that?
Well, so often in bed at night, I turn reaching out, and then I realize I'm alone. And many is the time in the afternoon, if I'm taking a nap or something and I hear a rustle, and I know it's her moving on the sofa near me, and then it isn't. She had a remarkable sense of humor, and sometimes I would just break up in laughter on my own, realizing what she had said about something. You know that from your own experience. But because she was so unique and because she was so special, the fact that she's physically gone, in a sense, doesn't matter that much. I mean, it matters greatly on many levels, but I mean, as far as her presence is concerned, I feel it all the time. I haven't, nor have I wanted to form a relationship with someone else. It's been now almost 2 years. I mean, I have friends who I meet from time to time, but nobody, there's an old song that I always love quoting: how are you going to keep them down on the farm once they have seen Paris? Meaning, once you've seen Paris, what can a farmer or a person from the country see to interest him after Paris? Zita was like that. Granny was like that. So the bar is very high. And I'm not suggesting I compare everybody to her. It's not that. She was unique as other people are in their own way. But I don't have this overwhelming sense of, oh my God, I don't want to be on my own. Oh, I want somebody to share. Some people are very much need that. I don't. I live on my own. I occasionally have visitors come by, family come by, whether it's to play canasta or chess, or your cousin comes often to play. But that's it. There's no sense of, oh my God, where is somebody I've got to be living with? I don't feel that way.
Well, it's amazing. I think it's powerful, and I think that it shows. I mean, I look at memories of like how I would experience your relationship with Granny, and it was like, and I said this at her funeral as well, it's like it was just colour, like it was laughter, it was music, it was experience, it was travel, it was a friendship. I remember asking you and Granny one time, like, how do you constantly have things to talk about? Like, you've been together for however many years, like you find new ways to, experience that connection with each other. And I think it's rare as well, because I've seen so many relationships and so many, figures, whether it's through friends, parents, grandparents, whatever. And it's like, you know, when you see something that's amazing, you know, when you see something that's unique, as you said, it's not easy to replace. So it's probably good, you know, or nice to come to terms with the fact that life is different without your life partner.
Just going back to something I was saying earlier about camp life and the war. I don't know whether you know, Steven Spielberg started a project called the Shoah Project, Shoah meaning Holocaust, in which he wanted to have interviewed all the people who had survived Auschwitz and the other camps in Europe. But then they extended it to people like myself who had been in camp in China. So I was interviewed by the Holocaust Center, and I realized on a real global scale how fortunate I and my family were for not being part of that other cohort of people in Europe. Because sure, we were in prison camps. Sure, life was difficult. Conditions were very minimal. Food was sometimes horrible. Bugs inside, horse meat that was off, terrible. But the realization that, you know, Jews often talk about l'chaim, to life. Life, l'chaim, was what was important. That was not being threatened, whereas every move you made in Europe was. So on that scale, there's so much to be thankful for that it's almost difficult to put into words when you realize what the alternatives could have been.
Do you think that you approach life with that attitude of gratitudes that you come back to, even, you know, in grief? And
absolutely so. I think gratitude, that's why I connected it. What I wanted to say is that even though, or maybe because we had 40 years of married life together, I am so grateful for the time that I had with Granny that it's not so much grieving as saying thank you. Because where do I get a chance to have an experience like that? I was so fortunate. And the family connection that still persists, as you know, Granny's family, which includes you, all the members of the family are my family. Your brother was older than you. I think he was about 25 before he realized I wasn't his actual blood grandfather. He never realized it. And that's the way I feel. I feel connected in a way that transcends blood connections. In fact, sometimes it's far more powerful than blood connections. You know, you can choose your friends, but you can't choose your family, sort of thing.
I remember asking when I was little about all of the grandparents, because there were 2 remarriages. I ended up having 3 because it was anyway. Yeah, I had 3 grandparents. I remember grandparents' day at school. None. Really?
No occasion. I met one grandparent for 20 minutes at the age of 86, and that was it. I've never met any of the others. So I've often had to imagine it. But go on, you were saying.
I was going to say
3 sets of grandparents.
On Grandparents' Day, I got to invite 6 grandparents.
Yeah. How amazingly fortunate. Well, I think it's fortunate. I don't know. Not having experienced my own, I don't know. Maybe it would have been terrible.
Well, I think it's interesting because my connection to different grandparents, like the blood relation, wasn't relevant as to who I was most connected to.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. Much the same thing.
Definitely. I think as well her last words on this earth were...
Oh, I will never, ever forget that. That last hour was probably the most extraordinary hour I've ever experienced in my life. That a woman who on some subliminal level absolutely knew that she was going, she was dying, was literally speaking individually to all of us and thanking me for the life we had together. And I mean, talk about her generosity of spirit. It wasn't, I'm scared. It wasn't, oh, what's going to happen to me? It was, thank you. It was totally inspiring to me.
I remember going to therapy. Hang on, I'm going to take a break. Thank God we're only 37 minutes in.
Yeah, but this is the real part of the interview.
I
This
remember
is getting down to brass tacks.
My therapist said to me she gave you such a gift when I went through what happened, which was basically she had cancer. And her decline, we were all pretty much, how many of us were there? Like probably 12 of us. The nurses were saying it was only 2 at a time. And by the end of it, there was all 12 of us around her bedside, which thank God that was allowed, because she said to us, you know, I can't do it anymore. I'm in so much pain. And we said to her, it's okay, you know, you've fought for so long. And then she just sat up and she said individual words to
Yes.
everyone.
Exactly. How extraordinary was that?
And it was in her dying moments that
Absolutely. She was giving of herself.
Yeah.
That if nothing else I said would explain what she was like in that moment or in that half hour was the whole story. She gave of herself to each person. She apologized to one for not attending the wedding. She apologized to another to not seeing person starting their career. It was an individual word to everybody. Where do you find a person like that? I don't know. I don't expect to find a person like that in my lifetime. You know, it was that was who she was. I've met a few people in my lifetime, but nobody like that.
Yeah. And I remember her saying she was wishing us luck. Was she thanking us? She thanked you. That was it. Weren't her last words, thank you for a wonderful life.
Yes, that's right. And I just repeated the same words. I was overwhelmed by her generosity of spirit. That's what she was thinking about, thanking me. Because we used to travel a lot. Particularly after she stopped her business, which got in the way a lot because we couldn't travel. But then we traveled sometimes 4 or 5 months a year and loved to cruise and sit on the balcony and read and just watch the ocean go by. So we did have a wonderful life together. But like I said earlier, it's mainly a sense of gratitude that I have rather than, oh my God, what have I lost? What am I going to do? It's not that sense. It's that I was given a gift of such immense proportions that I can only be thankful and appreciative of what I was given.
I remember your words to her at her service. I think the last sentence of your speech was, well, I guess I ended on top.
Yes, that's right. For some reason, we've decided to have our graves on top of each other. And then there was that huge mound of earth when I first started talking, and I said, Zita, has the earth moved for you too? I mean, it just felt appropriate. I've heard from many people that was the most moving and touching funeral service that they've ever been to, and they would like kind of guidelines as to how to do their own in that way.
I also had about 4 friends say to me, I know this sounds really grim, but I want my funeral to be exactly like that.
That's so interesting, Gabby, because that's exactly what I would hear from a number of people, because it was so different. Like she said, no mumbo jumbo, no rabbi, no nonsense.
No
Let's
religion.
just say farewell, which is what we did. And I think we did it in the most touching way that I can even contemplate.
Yeah.
It poured out of our hearts, out of the actual love and caring we felt for each other. That's how that happened. There was no preparation or need for preparation. It just happened. And that to me is the most important is the spontaneity. I don't think I can look for happiness. It has to happen. I don't think I can look for loving. It has to happen. It's got nothing to do with rationality or logic. there are much deeper forces at work. So trying sometimes too hard to find is just going to get in the way because it's not something you look for. It's something that happens, that almost organically takes place.
Do you think that and I'm thinking about, love and joy specifically, from what you learned from your first marriage into your second, did you stop looking or trying to find this? Was there ever a part of you that was searching for it, or did you follow moments where it was happening?
Look, the question you're asking is very interesting because the people involved, my first and second wives, were so different in personality, and that made all the difference. Robert Frost had that famous saying, I took two paths in a wood, I took the one less traveled, it's made all the difference. What made all the difference was that difference in personality between the two of them. Zita was such a giving, generous, appreciative person, whereas my first wife was very, very different. And those, in French they say "vive la différence." Well, that's the point. The difference is what counts. And as a result of my first marriage, I realized what was really significant and important. But I wouldn't have realized it without her. It's the symbiosis, is the connection between the two that created that. I remember before I got married to her, when I first knew her, and she was dental assistant to your grandfather, who was a dentist. Her smile was just so telling. And once at dinner, I said, do you have a sister? I was thinking, isn't there any way I can get connected to you? Well, eventually, minus one sister, we got together.
How would you, I see a lot of people in relationships where they're not fulfilled and they are, I don't want to use the word settling, but, it's almost like this lack of, well, this will do, everyone else has already made their decision and settled down. And there are people in relationships that I know of who have said to me, it's probably not the right one, but I'm not ready to leave, et cetera, et cetera. And you've been a marriage counselor in your past as well. What is your perspective on that?
I think I go back to the main issue, which is to know thyself. I have to understand myself and what's motivating me before I can even think about who I want to connect with. Because, like I said earlier, my head was turned by all the qualities that my first wife had, but I didn't understand that I really didn't need those qualities, nor did I appreciate them in the end. In fact, I disliked them intensely. And one of the main reasons I got divorced and brought up my own kids, because I did, was because my first wife was so indulgent, particularly of our son. I said, this is going to spoil him. And I don't need to go into the details, but in many ways, as you would know, he was spoiled. Not my daughter so much, but it's about knowing myself and understanding what it is I really want. I'm not talking about on a conscious level. I'm talking not on a rational level. I'm talking about unconsciously. That's why I pay so much attention to dreams. I used to run dream groups because dreams, Freud has a very famous phrase, are the royal road to the unconscious. And Jung's notion was our task is to make the things that are unconscious conscious, because we don't know who we are unless we look at the unconscious, illogical, irrational sides of ourselves. It's not so easy.
It's bloody hard.
Yes, bloody hard.
It's very hard. Have you found that through therapy yourself, or have you found that through
A mixture. I can't say that the therapy I've had at the time or since have I appreciated that much, because I just don't think it was right for me.
Mm.
There was one who barely said a word. I didn't find that very helpful.
Oh, well, that doesn't sound helpful at
No,
all.
no. And then I've been in group therapy after my divorce when I thought I've got to learn more about myself to bring up my kids. And one very interesting thing used to happen. We were a mixed group of men and women. And often I would say something, and one of the women would say, "That's very aggressive, Felix." Invariably, the next meeting, whichever woman had said that, apologized to me publicly and said, "No, I've been thinking about it and I realized it wasn't aggressive at all. You were reaching out to me." And that sort of understanding is rare, you know.
At what points what have been pivotal moments where you've learned things about yourself from your own unconscious, or what's come to light?
I've had various crucial points in my life. Going to China, prison camp, leaving on my own at 13. Many other experiences after that. I suppose it's the ability, or at least the intention, to face up to what the new reality is. It's not easy, but I think often people don't like to face what the reality is. But then I've found it's important to get to know it, be friendly with it, the reality, because there may be some really good things in it. So I guess my overall principle is to try to understand what part I'm playing in the whole story, you know?
Mm.
It's like I'm the script writer, I'm the dramatist, I'm the one that's writing the script here. And I hope it's a good play, you know? It may not be the way I'm writing it. I may have to change it. And there's an old phrase in writing classes of kill your darlings off. The things that you love the most maybe are the worst part, you know, because for some reason you're connected to them.
That's so interesting.
I do a bit of writing myself, and sometimes I'm really fond of a phrase or an idea, and then somehow looking back and I think that's not really working very well there. I don't do that much. I do very little writing these days, but I did write a fair bit after I got divorced, and it's not so easy to write with a really unique voice. I don't know whether you do any writing yourself, but it's quite a task.
What do you mean by unique voice? Say something that's not
Your
already
own.
been said.
I mean that's your own voice. Often editors will look for a voice, as in something is not just the cliches, not just the sameness of or being very descriptive, you know, the sunset with beautiful gold. All this is sometimes crappy. But if somebody says something, I wrote something once that out of all the pieces I've written, I suppose I've had the most reaction. It was about a piece of green velvet fabric that was a curtain between us and the 5 other families in this same room when we were in prison camp. That's all we had was a curtain, my 3 sisters and myself. And I described how, in a way, the appearance and the hackles and the velvet plushy parts represented parts of our lives. And something about my description of that has touched many, many people. And I can go on trying to describe an amazing flight I had or an experience, but there's something about that green velvet and the way I'm speaking about it straight from the heart that apparently touches people. That's what I meant by a kind of a unique voice.
To access that heart?
Oh, yeah. It's not easy. It's often editors will cut out 90% of a thing, but that part there, that's important. I used to run a writing group as well as the dream groups, but I've given it up because I haven't really felt so much like writing. It's not that I've decided I have nothing to say. It's that it comes out in rather banal kind of ordinary way, which I don't like. You know, I'm quite fussy in terms of my own writing, but also of people that I read. If I don't like the start of a book, I'll just give it up. And particularly if I'm listening on a cassette, if I don't like the voice of the person reading it, there's no way, even though the story may be brilliant, I cannot listen to that voice for the next 10 hours.
I hope I have a good voice.
I've always enjoyed your voice when I listen to your blog, your podcast.
You got it right.
I definitely think you've got a very interesting and engaging voice. I remember I was extremely shy and I didn't even know how to debate, so I joined the Hong Kong Toastmasters Club, which is a public speaking. And the experience of actually getting up and talking taught me a hell of a lot of things, and they've stood me in good stead.
How do you find, I mean, I know you quote a lot from Jung and, you know, a lot, like not so much the new material that's come out. I find a lot of the really good, hearty lessons have come from history or the past, and I find that a lot of the time now when I'm searching for something in modern day times, it's not there. Like it's lacking this heart, or like coming from the heart that you've sort of spoken about. It's a lot more materialistic. Do you engage with art that's modern, like whether it be writing, whether it be...
Well, just one general point, I feel it seems to me to be very easy to follow a leader like a guru, a Jung, a Freud. There are very great dangers in that because there are limitations to everybody's outlook on life. And so I think it's really important that we discover new approaches. I value Jung's ideas, but I'm sure in some ways they were not necessarily all very reliable. I remember visiting his house in Zurich and his grandson when I said, how come this is not a museum like Freud's house in London is? He said, my grandfather said some unfortunate things during his life. So, you know, you have to look at the shadow side of people and particularly me at my own shadow side, the part that I don't recognize, the part that maybe not so nice or not so thoughtful, but it's terribly important to get in touch with that side because, like I say, Jung's idea of the shadow is you don't recognize it yourself. He often would say, if you dislike something in a person you've just met, look at what that is in yourself that you dislike, because for you to recognize that another person you've just met must mean you've got some prior knowledge. So it's actually you that you're disliking these qualities in you and you're projecting it out onto the other person. And when a person is self-aware like that, I think it clarifies an awful lot. Because projection, to my mind, is one of the, in a way, most dangerous things. People project hate onto other people, and then they want to get rid of them. Look at what's happening in Israel and Gaza now. It's just absolutely shocking. It breaks me up, but I don't know what the answer is. And I certainly don't live there nor have to make these decisions. But it's horrible.
Awful. There actually are not words for it other than both sides are showing such hate rather than coming from a place of unity, connection, love. I had one more question. I was wondering, in terms of your dream groups, I think that there's an important... I remember a story of a symbol coming through Granny's dream, one of her dreams, that gave her... It was like a symbol for something that had happened to her brother who had passed away. There was
That's right, a very important dream. I remember it well.
Can we discuss that dream and then sort of just talk about the importance of being aware of your dreams?
Okay. So as I recall, and I recall fairly clearly what happened, she was in a mixed group, male-female, with the psychologist who was running the group. And she came up with this dream in which she saw a fetus I think, in the back of the car. And when asked by the convener of the group, "Do you have any siblings?" She said, "No." "Yes. I mean, no." He said, "Well, what do you mean?" Said she had a brother who had died 2 weeks or 3 weeks old when she was 5. So the problem was that every time your granny, my wife, tried to discuss this issue with your great-grandmother, she would never engage. And in fact, Granny's own father had said, "If you ever need to know about the death of your brother, speak to me. You won't get anything from your mother." After this dream, the dream convener said, "I think it would really be important for you to get in touch with your mother and get her to talk about this before she dies." So she called her up. She was in Queensland. And she said, "Mom, I'm just trying to understand about Charles, my brother." She said, "I don't remember anything. The weather here is shocking. I'm going to be returning soon." That's all. And she never spoke about it again. So for Granny, it was like a blockage where she couldn't really understand. I mean, I also lost a brother when he was 2 weeks old, which is interesting because many times along the way, your granny and I realized we had had similar connections, not easily understandable, but we had similar things happen in our lives, like the loss of a partner, of a sibling. So that was what had happened with the dream. And Granny, tried to understand what it must have meant for her, because in a sense she was both affirming and denying the fact that she had a sibling. Well, she had one, but in a sense, not, he was only 2 weeks old. She didn't really experience him.
Wasn't there a symbol that was appearing in her dream, which was the symbol of what condition he had had that had died?
Look, she always said that it was Tay-Sachs disease, which is a condition particularly prevalent with Ashkenazi Jews. I think that the symptom was a red spot in the eye.
Yeah.
She said, as far as she remembers, that's what she was told, maybe by her father. But she didn't have much detail, and I can understand her confusion because she really didn't know her brother, neither did I. I've lamented the fact that my brother died all my life. I would have loved to have had a brother. I mean, I have had 3 sisters. One is still alive at 96. I speak to her every day in Chicago. But I would love to have had a brother who would have guided me, maybe given me ideas about how to live and what to do. And because I hadn't had my father around most of my life, I didn't really have a male figure around that could guide me. But I was never told not to speak about it.
Interesting. Is there anything else from a dream perspective that you think is important to voice or know?
Well, in general, writing down dreams are an essential part of understanding what's going on in the unconscious, because you'll often find that you refer back to a particular symbol or particular image, which are all symbolic in dreams. They're not literal. And then you might say, oh, well, maybe this has got a connection with this. It's a puzzle. It really does take sleuthing,
Are there any...
I still write down my dreams. I have maybe 20 books of dreams that I sometimes look at from time to time to see what I was dreaming about.
Because oftentimes, like, if I remember Granny used to say to me, if you dream of a death, it actually, it in reality is a birth of something. It's not a literal death.
Exactly. And that's the main point, is not to take these dream symbols literally, like the death meaning the death of somebody. It may be the end of something and the beginning of something else.
So where do you go to find what those symbols mean? Because the internet is crap. I've tried.
I don't think you can find it outside. You have to look at, like I said earlier, in yourself. You have
But
to
more so the
see what does that
symbols.
mean to you, because in the end, it's the dreamer that knows what the dream's about. Nobody else can just tell them, oh, because you had an eagle, it means something about flight or.
Okay, so one time I dreamt that I was chased by a crocodile. But what do I make of that dream?
So I guess you have to imagine what it felt like, what a crocodile represents to you, that you were even taking the chance or the risk of being in the water with a crocodile. That's hardly the best company to keep. So, whether that suggests that you might be a person who is taking very big risks, that you're in the water with a crocodile, which is not necessarily the healthiest thing to be. So it may be a comment on one's taking chances. Not that one shouldn't take chances. It depends on what it is and what the outcome might be. Sometimes you have to take risks. People who don't usually just are locked into a very limited life.
Yeah.
But that, rather than see the crocodile as an actuality, literally, what does it mean? So whatever a crocodile is, it can eat you up if it gets hold of you. So whatever it is that's eating you up, if you see what I mean, emotionally, maybe you have to pay attention to that and learn to befriend the crocodile rather, because many times with dreams of snakes, the snakes are also supposed to, in mythical qualities, have healing qualities. Of course, they have poison in their fangs, but you have to start to relate to it symbolically, not literally that a crocodile is after you, but something is ready to eat you up, if you see what I mean.
Very interesting.
Okay.
You
Sorry? No.
My last question is...
Oh, that was your last question earlier.
I
you
have
said.
one more last
Okay.
question, then I promise you it'll be the last one. If you had one message for the younger generation, what would it be?
That I don't have a message. That would be the message.
That is
No,
really?
seriously, I don't think my messages are going to be relevant. I find myself increasingly irrelevant in this day and age. I sit with young people and I think, you know what? I'm not in this game anymore. I don't understand what they're talking about. I don't understand what their values are. So therefore, I'm the wrong person to ask.
No, but you're the right person in that sense. This is what we need to be hearing. That you might not be in the game, quote unquote, because, technology and whatever, but the lessons that you've learned are more important than the struggles that we're dealing with right now of status and fast pace and whatever game is going on within society of consumerism. You were in a prisoner of war camp. You experienced love and life, and these are the conversations that are the soul of it, like the heart of it. So if anything, it's more relevant.
Just as a general thing, if I ever get worried about something or I get concerned, anxious, I try to take a very deep set of breaths and realize that maybe I'm not looking at the whole picture. There may be something that I've missed, and just taking my time, being patient, and seeing what's really important and trying to resolve it that way. Sorry that it doesn't sound like a ready-made message for young people. But I'm learning so much from young people, and I'm serious. It reminds me of the time that my son went to Ladakh, and he waited 3 days to go and see this Rinpoche, the guru. And when he arrived, the Rinpoche said to him, "So what can you teach me, my son?" He said, No, I'm here to learn. He said, "No, I'm here to learn from you." That's the way I feel about young people. I'm actually learning from them. It's a new world. It's a different ball game. You have to deal with things that I never had to deal with. Technology now is frightening.
In what sense frightening?
Oh, particularly with artificial intelligence and the things that come up with totally fake information coming out, appearing to be real, and understanding. Well, I mean, in a way, we distance ourselves from each other with our constant text messages and emails. we don't speak to each other often
Mm.
directly. I'm far more in favor of actually speaking person to person, but like I said, I'm part of an old school. You know, I'm not. I don't know how to type very quickly on the phone, but technology. I often refer to the fact that in the 1950s in Tokyo, as competitors of Sony, we made transistor radios with 6 transistors. My iPhone has 6 billion transistors in it. It has more computing power than the original IBM machine that took 2 football fields to fit on. This is huge stuff.
Mm.
And for instance, who could possibly understand Bitcoin? I've tried. And I have a relative who apparently has made millions on it. Good luck to him.
Maybe I should start looking into Bitcoin. I am shocked to hear that you find yourself irrelevant, but
No, I don't feel as I'm irrelevant. It's just that young people have to face a totally different set of difficulties. No, I find that in between the cracks, I'm relevant. If somebody wants to hear what I have to say, they may not.
Do you know how many people have said that they would love, when I started saying to people, I'm going to have my grandpa on, we have amazing conversations, and I think that he has a lot of wisdom, and so many people have said that is the episode I'm most looking forward to.
Well, you know, it reminds me of a famous politician in the States who, for some reason, the person introducing him at a speech that he was to give took about 10 minutes to introduce him. And he was a Texan, and he said in his drawl, he said, "Ladies and gentlemen, after hearing that glowing introduction, I just can't wait to hear myself talk." And that's the way it's been today.
That's amazing. Okay. Are you getting up and walking out?
No, I don't know which way is out.
I
that matter, I don't know which way is in either. It's all black to me.
I get the feeling you're ready to wrap up.
I think I'm ready to wrap up.
Thank you so much for coming on. I really do appreciate your time.
That was really enjoyable. I hope it's of some use.
Absolutely. I'm glad
Can we hear it back?
Yeah, I'm glad it was enjoyable despite the fact that you asked 3 times if we could wrap up.
Well, I mean, an hour is sort of my idea of a long time. Or rather, it's not my head's idea, it's the body's idea, if you know what I mean.
All right, we will wrap up. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Gabby.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you do get something out of the podcast and you do enjoy it, the number one way to support me is to follow me across my socials on hdydi.pod and to also subscribe on YouTube. I look forward to seeing you next week.